The dawn air pressed against my chest, heavy with a warning I couldn't name. I was 19, my palms sweaty on the wheel of our work van, the engine's rumble a faint comfort. James, my crew partner, sprawled in the passenger seat, his coffee's bitter scent filling the cab. We were headed to a routine HVAC job, but the address, 1427 Oak Hollow, felt like a bruise in my mind, raw and unfamiliar. I didn't know then that this house would unravel everything I thought I knew, leaving me haunted by truths too dark to face. My boots scraped the gravel outside our office, the sky a bruised purple above the low brick building. I'd been at this job for a year and a half, ever since my dad's voice sliced through my plans. Get a job or get out. He'd grown up abandoned, left to grandparents who fed him scraps of care, his childhood a battle he never let me forget. His stories were sparse, but they painted a life of hunger and solitude, a weight he passed to me. My mom was a ghost, gone before I could remember her face, leaving a void where a family should have been. Rusty, my dog, filled that gap, his warm fur and eager eyes, my only constant. The office reeked of stale smoke and oil, the air thick with the crew's rough laughter. I grabbed our gear trading jabs with the guys, their voices a shield against the unease creeping up my spine. James joined me, his face etched with lines deeper than his 30 years, torn between his kids and an ex who lingered like a shadow. We worked well together, his steady hands guiding my quick learning. I'd risen from apprentice to crew member, fast, my calluses a badge of pride. But that morning, the work order for Oak Hollow stopped me cold. The address, scrawled in smudged ink, seemed to pulse like it held a secret I wasn't meant to know. I'd always known this day would come. My dad had warned me my whole life. When you're done with school, you're on your own. His words were a mantra etched into every argument, every lecture. He'd survived by clawing his way through, and he expected the same of me. I didn't hate him for it. His life had been a war, his parents abandoning him, his grandparents barely keeping him alive. He'd tell me fragments of his past, his voice hard. I'd have been better off on the streets. That was all I got a glimpse into a pain he locked away. My mom, I figured, couldn't handle him. She left 9 months after I was born, and I never asked why. The math was clear enough. The van's engine growled as we pulled out the town unfolding around us. Our area was a patchwork of hope and ruin. Neat lawns gave way to rusted cars, picket fences to boarded windows. A job could end with a tip or a threat, and you learned to read the signs. I loved the work, though, the rhythm of it, the way my hands knew what to do. James and I were a team, our banter a shield against the grind. He'd talk about his kids, his voice softening, then darken when his ex came up. I'd listen my own life simpler, but no less heavy. Rusty waited for me at home, his tail thumping my only family. That morning, though, something felt off. The air was too still, the sky too low. I glanced at James, his eyes half closed, and wondered if he felt it too. The work order lay between us. Oak Hollow's address, a silent challenge. I'd learned fast in this job, climbing the ladder from grunt work to skilled tasks, but nothing prepared me for the dread pooling in my gut. I told myself it was just another house, another job, but the lie didn't stick. 1427 Oak Hollow wasn't just a place, it was a presence waiting for us to step into its grasp. The road stretched ahead, lined with trees that leaned too close, their branches clawing at the sky. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my pulse quickening. James stirred, sipping his coffee, oblivious to the weight settling over me. I wanted to tell him to say the address felt wrong, but the words stuck in my throat. We were just workers, doing our job, heading to a house like any other. But deep down, I knew this wasn't routine. Oak Hollow was calling, and I wasn't ready for what it would say. The house hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. It crouched at the end of Oak Hollow, a festering wound in a neighborhood too perfect to be real. The grass choked the yard wild and tangled, swallowing rusted gnomes and broken stone angels. The roof sagged shingles, peeling like rotting flesh, and the driveway cracked under gnarled tree roots. But it was the windows, black, not tinted, but solid, light-devouring black, that made my breath catch. This wasn't a house. It was a trap, and we were already inside it. The drive to Oak Hollow wound through our town's split soul. Half the streets glowed with neat lawns and white fences. The other half decayed cars, rusted windows boarded. You never knew if a job would end with a handshake or a knife. This neighborhood, though, was eerily pristine. Houses lined like soldiers, their yards clipped and silent. Then there was 1427, a blight among them, its presence a scream in the quiet. The grass reached my knees, weaving through shattered bird baths, the air thick with neglect. A tunnel of twisted branches arched over the driveway, blocking the sun, leading to a garage that hadn't been touched in decades. Those windows stopped me dead. They weren't just dark, they were voids swallowing every trace of daylight. I stood by the van, my boots rooted to the gravel. my pulse loud in my ears. James, his face tight, walked to the front door. He knocked, and it opened, a sliver, maybe 4 inches. A raspy voice, answering from the shadows. I couldn't see her, but the air shifted heavier, colder. James came back, his eyes clouded. She says, "Meet her around back," he muttered, his voice flat, like he'd seen something he couldn't name. I grabbed our tool bags, my hands shaking, the weight of the house pressing against me. As we rounded the corner, music drifted from the garage, faint, warped like an old radio caught between stations. I pictured someone inside, maybe tinkering with a car, but the thought didn't ease the knot in my chest. The air grew musty, clinging to my skin, and my steps slowed. The basement door waited, its frame, rusted wood, splintered a mouth ready to swallow us. James pushed it open, and a wave of cold air rushed out, carrying a stench of mildew and something sour like meat left too long. The basement was a crypt, its concrete walls stained with years of damp neglect. It split into 2 halves, our work area lit by a flickering bulb, and a dark living room beyond a heavy door. The bulb's sickly glow barely reached the corners, leaving the edges drowned in shadow. I set my bag down, my heart thudding, the darkness feeling alive, watchful. James wrinkled his nose at the smell, his eyes squinting. "This place gives you the creeps, right?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, wordless, and stepped outside, leaving me alone in the tomb. I tried to focus, my hands moving to unpack tools, but the shadows pressed closer, the air thick with something I couldn't name. Every glance over my shoulder found nothing but the feeling of being watched grew a weight on my neck. The bulb hummed its light unsteady, and I wondered if it would die, plunging me into the dark. The house didn't just stand apart. It was a part, a world unto itself, cut off from reality. Those black windows haunted me, their emptiness, a promise of something hidden, something waiting. I thought of home, of Rusty's warm fur, to ground myself, but the memory felt distant, like the house was stealing it. James was outside, safe in the daylight, but I was here, in its grip. The music from the garage faded, leaving a silence that was worse, a void that begged to be filled. I wanted to run, to leave the job unfinished, but we needed the money, the work. I told myself it was just a house, just a job, but the lie tasted bitter. 1427. Oak Hollow wasn't empty. It was full, and it knew we were here. She appeared like a nightmare I didn't know I was having. Miss Brown stood inches from me, her pale face a mask of wrinkles, her eyes nearly black, unblinking. The basement's cold clung to my skin, the air sour with decay, but it was her smile, too wide, too knowing, that turned my blood to ice. I'd been alone, working under the flickering bulb, when she materialized, silent. Impossible. This house wasn't just wrong. It was hers, and she was its heart. The basement was a prison, its concrete walls closing in the single bulb above me, spitting weak light. I'd been tearing out the old furnace, my hands steady, despite the dread gnawing at my gut. James had left his footsteps fading outside, and the silence was a weight broken only by the bulb's hum. The darkness beyond my workspace was absolute, a void that seemed to breathe, watching me. I kept glancing back, expecting something, someone to step into the light, but nothing came. Until it did. I was cutting a high-voltage wire, my focus tight, when sparks erupted, scorching my gloves. My heart lurched. I'd tripped. The breaker. Hadn't I? I'd pulled the wires from the old unit, checked the panel. How could it still be live? I stumbled to the main breaker, my flashlight beam jerking across the walls, shadows dancing like ghosts. The panel was cold, the switch stiff, but I flipped it. The bulb flared back, and I turned my breath shallow. She was there. Miss Brown stood so close, I could have touched her. Her presence soyant, unnatural. She was ancient, maybe 80. Her skin pale as bone folding in deep creases around her elbows, and face like a doll left to rot. Her eyes, nearly black, locked onto mine, unblinking, bottomless. A smile curled her lips. But it wasn't human. It stretched too far, too sharp, like she knew something I didn't. I choked out a "Hi," my voice cracking, my legs trembling. She didn't speak, just turned, gliding upstairs, her feet barely brushing the steps, silent as a specter. I staggered to the van, collapsing beside James, my chest heaving. "She's weird, isn't she?" he said, his eyes wide, his voice low. I nodded, throat tight. The image of her burned into my mind. Her smile, her eyes, they weren't just strange. They were wrong, like she wasn't fully here, or worse, wasn't fully human. The air outside felt lighter, but the house's weight lingered its black windows, staring down, unyielding. James told me what happened at the door. He'd knocked, and it opened a crack, her voice rasping through the gap, telling him to go around back. He hadn't seen her face, just a shadow. But it was enough to unsettle him. "Something's off," he said, his hands gripping his coffee cup. I wanted to agree to spill the fear clawing at me, but the words wouldn't come. We were here to do a job, to get paid to go home. But the house didn't care about our plans. I thought of Rusty, his warm fur to anchor myself, but the memory felt thin, like the house was stealing it. The basement weighted its cold, seeping into my bones, and I knew I had to go back. The job wasn't done, and running wasn't an option. James stayed outside, his face pale, and I envied him. The door loomed its rust a warning, but I pushed through the stench, hitting me again. Mildew, sour meat, something alive in the decay. The bulb flickered, casting shadows that moved when I didn't. I worked fast, my hands shaking, the tools heavy. Every moment felt like a test, the house daring me to stay. Miss Brown's face haunted me, her smile a blade in my thoughts. I wondered who she was, what she was, but the questions led nowhere. The house was hers, and we were intruders, stumbling into a place that didn't want us. Her silence was worse than words. It was a promise, a threat, and I wasn't ready to hear it. The house was watching us, its black windows like eyes that never blinked. We ate lunch in the van, the air thick with dread. Every glance at the house, a reminder we weren't alone. Our tool bags packed and zipped by unseen hands sat by the basement door, a message we couldn't ignore. Arnold arrived, his laughter jarring, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something waited just out of sight, ready to strike. We huddled in the van, the house looming over us, its presence a weight on my chest. I ordered food through an app too shaken to leave the black windows, staring down unyielding. James and I barely spoke, our silence heavy with shared fear. The food arrived, but it tasted like ash, my appetite gone. I kept glancing at the house, its decayed roof and wild grass, a mockery of the neat neighborhood around it. The tunnel of branches over the driveway seemed to pulse a throat, ready to swallow us. Arnold pulled up around noon, his van rattling his grin too bright for the gloom. A religious man like me, he'd always been a comfort, his faith a shield I envied. But today his jokes fell flat, his laughter grating against the tension. James briefed him, his voice low, describing Miss Brown's eerie presence, the basement's cold, the wrongness of it all. Arnold chuckled, shaking his head. Scared of an old lady, he teased, striding toward the house, his confidence a challenge to its power. We followed reluctant and stopped short at the basement door. Our tool bags were there, perfectly packed, zippers closed, tools neatly arranged. I froze my breath, catching I hadn't touched them, and James swore he hadn't either. "What the hell?" he muttered, his face pale. Arnold shrugged, calling it a prank, but his eyes flickered uncertain. My gut screamed. The house did this. It didn't want us here, and it was making it clear. We moved to the living room area, a maze of dusty furniture draped in plastic, like a scene from a forgotten film. The lights were dead, so we used flashlights, their beams cutting through the gloom, shadows dancing on the walls. The air was thick, the sour stench stronger, clinging to my clothes. Arnold climbed the stairs to install the thermostat, his voice echoing. "Ma'am, we're putting it up. Okay?" No answer came, but footsteps creaked above, slow and deliberate, each one a hammer on my nerves. I started up the stairs, my flashlight trembling, the cold biting my skin. Halfway up, a chill stopped me sharp and sudden. I turned, and she was there, at the bottom, standing still as a statue. Her pupils gleamed faintly like sparks in the dark, her face pale and wrinkled, her smile gone, but her presence heavier than ever. My breath caught, and a smell hit me, rotten, acrid, wrong, like the air itself was poisoned. I tapped James, whispering, "She's there." He leaned over his face, draining of color. "No one's there, man." I turned again, and he was right. The space was empty. But I knew what I'd seen. The house was alive, its eyes everywhere, its will pressing against us. The packed bags, the footsteps, her sudden appearances, it was all a warning, a game we couldn't win. Arnold's voice called from above, oblivious, but I felt the truth. We were intruders, and the house was judging us. I wanted to run, to leave the job, but the need for money, for survival, kept me rooted. James stood beside me, his silence a mirror of my fear, and I wondered if he saw her too, or if the house chose me alone. The darkness grew heavier, the flashlight's beam weaker, and I knew we weren't safe. Miss Brown, or whatever she was, wasn't just a woman. She was the house, its voice, its will. And we were in her domain, blind to the rules. The air turned toxic, a stench that wasn't just decay, but something alive, malicious. Miss Brown stood in the kitchen, her slouched form a lie, her eyes burning through us. The house's black windows, sealed with trash bags, trapped us in its grip, the buzzing bulb above a mockery of light. Every step felt like defiance, every breath a theft, and I knew we were running out of time. Arnold reached the kitchen, flipping a switch. A single bulb buzzed to life over the sink, casting long shadows that writhed on the walls. Miss Brown appeared, slouched, her voice a soft "sure" when Arnold introduced himself. The kitchen was spotless, counters gleaming a stark contrast to the basement's decay, but the sour stench clung sharper, now invasive. I noticed the windows covered in thick black trash bags, taped tightly, blocking all light. The house didn't want to be seen, or didn't want us to see out. The smell was worse here, not just mildew or rot, but something wrong, like the air had turned against us. It coated my throat, my skin a living thing that burrowed deep. Arnold worked on the thermostat, his movements quick, his usual ease gone. I stood with James, our flashlights trembling, the darkness pressing closer. The footsteps from above had stopped, but the silence was worse, a void that held its breath, waiting. Miss Brown shifted her head, tilting, and her smile returned unnatural, stretching past her eyes, a blade in the dim light. "How many kids do you have?" she asked, her voice high-piercing, cutting through the buzz of the bulb. Arnold froze, his tools clattering. "What?" he stammered, his face tight. She listed his children's names. Anne Barbara Chuck, each syllable precise, deliberate. "There's one more, isn't there?" she added. Her eyes locked on him unblinking. Arnold's face drained his breath shallow. He had 3 kids, no more, but she knew their names. How my heart pounded, the stench choking me, the air heavy with her presence. "Your wife's pregnant," she said, her finger pointing bony and accusing. Clara's the name she picked. The words were a violation, a theft of something private, sacred. Arnold's eyes darted to us wide with panic, and I felt the house's will tighten around us, its walls closer, its shadows alive. James bolted down the stairs, his boots heavy, his fear a spark in the gloom. Miss Brown's gaze shifted to me, slow, deliberate, her smile unchanging. The air grew colder, the stench sharper, and I knew she saw me, not just my face, but deeper into places I hid even from myself. The kitchen's light flickered the bulb's buzz, a scream in my ears, and I wanted to run to scream, but her eyes held me unyielding, endless. The house was her, and she was it, a single entity, ancient and hungry. The trash bags on the windows weren't just barriers. They were seals keeping something in or out. The smell wasn't just decay. It was her essence, her power. Every moment in that kitchen felt like a test, a judgment, and we were failing. Arnold stood rooted, his hands shaking, and I knew he felt it too. The house's gaze, her gaze peeling us apart. I thought of Rusty, of home, but the memory was faint, drowned by the stench, the dark her eyes. The house didn't just know us, it owned us, and every step deeper into its heart was a step we couldn't take back. Miss Brown's smile widened, and I knew we had to leave now before the house claimed us for good. Her voice cut through me. 3 syllables that broke my world. "Marissa," she said again and again, each word a knife in my heart. Marissa was my unborn child, lost to a miscarriage, a secret I'd buried deep. Miss Brown's smile stretched her eyes, black voids, and the house's grip tightened its walls, alive with her will. We ran, but the truth she spoke followed a shadow we couldn't outrun. The kitchen was a trap, its buzzing bulb a cruel joke, the black trash bags sealing us in. Miss Brown stood before Arnold, her smile a weapon, her voice naming his children. Anne, Barbara, Chuck, then his unborn child, Clara. Arnold's face was ash, his breath ragged, the air thick with the sour stench that was her. The house, the darkness. James had fled, his footsteps fading. But I stood frozen, her gaze shifting to me, slow and inevitable. "Marissa." She said the name, a blade sharp and cold. She repeated it 3 times, each syllable tearing open a wound I'd hidden. Marissa was the child my girlfriend and I lost, a grief we never spoke a name. We kept locked away. How did she know? My knees buckled, the stench choking me, the air crushing my chest. Her smile widened, curling like smoke, her eyes bottomless, seeing everything. My pain, my fear, my secrets. Arnold's voice broke the spell. A choked whisper. "What are you?" But she didn't answer. Her gaze still on me, unblinking. The house's walls seemed to pulse, the darkness alive, the bulb's light fading. I wanted to scream, to demand how she knew, but her smile silenced me, a promise of worse to come. The stench was unbearable, a living thing, her essence, her power. The kitchen wasn't a room. It was her heart, and we were its prey. James's shout from below snapped me free. "We gotta go," he yelled, his voice raw. I stumbled back, my flashlight falling, its beam spinning across the floor. Miss Brown didn't move, her smile unchanging, but the air grew heavier, a hand on my throat. Arnold grabbed my arm, his face pale, and we ran the stairs, shaking under us, the darkness chasing. The basement door loomed, our bags still packed, a final taunt from the house. We burst outside the daylight, blinding the air clean, but useless against the fear. James was in the van, pale hands gripping his lap. "Let's go," I rasped. Climbing in, my voice barely mine. Arnold sprinted past his van, roaring to life, tires spitting gravel. We drove in silence, the house shrinking in the rear view, but its presence clung a shadow in my bones. My mind raced. Had I left tools? Was she possessed? The questions were knives, cutting deeper. With every mile, Marissa's name echoed her voice in my head, soft but relentless. The house knew too much, saw too much, and it had spoken through her. I thought of my girlfriend, of the night we chose that name, the hope we lost. How could Miss Brown know? Was she a witch, a demon, or something worse? The van's engine hummed, but it couldn't drown out the truth. We'd walked into a place that wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had claimed a piece of us. The daylight felt wrong, too bright, too normal. The house was behind us, but its eyes, her eyes, followed unblinking, endless. We were free, but not really. Marissa's name was a chain binding me to that place, to her, to the house that knew too much. The house let us go, but it didn't release us. We drove back in silence, the van's hum, a weak shield against the fear that clung like damp rot. Marissa's name echoed in my head. Miss Brown's voice, a ghost that wouldn't fade. We didn't collect payment, didn't finish the job, but the house didn't care. It had what it wanted, a piece of us forever. The office was a blur, its familiar stink of smoke and oil, no comfort. We unloaded the van, our movements mechanical, James's face pale, his eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to talk, to spill the fear, but the words were ash useless. The work order for 1427 Oak Hollow sat on the dash, its ink smudged, like the house was erasing itself. I left it there, afraid to touch it, afraid it would pull me back. Next day, James called a meeting with our manager. His voice, low, urgent. He told it all the black windows, Miss Brown's smile, the packed bags, her impossible knowledge. Anne, Barbara Chuck, Clara, Marissa. The names hung in the air, heavy forbidden. The manager leaned back his chair, creaking his face, blank. "So you didn't collect?" he asked, ignoring the rest. James pressed. She knew Arnold's kids' names. Man. But he waved us off, promising collections would handle it. His dismissal was a slap, our fear reduced to a missed paycheck. We never heard more. The job vanished from our records like it never happened. No one called about payment. No one mentioned Oak Hollow. It was gone, but not for us. Arnold quit 3 weeks later, his 15 years in the trade discarded like a bad dream. He'd been steady, skilled, but that day broke him. We still talk, but never about the house, never about her. It's a door we keep locked, afraid of what's behind it. James and I stayed bound by the job by each other. We mention it sometimes, late at night, beers in hand, but we skirt the edges, afraid to dive too deep. Her smile, her eyes, Marissa's name. They're shadows we carry, heavy and cold. I see her in my dreams, standing in the kitchen, her voice soft, relentless. Marissa, Marissa, Marissa. I wake sweating. Rusty's warmth, my only anchor, but even he can't chase her away. The house changed me. I work the same job, walk the same streets, but I'm not the same. Every dark window, every strange smell pulls me back to Oak Hollow. I wonder about Miss Brown, who she was, what she was. A witch, a demon, or just the house's voice, its will-given form. I'll never know, and that's worse than any answer. The town moves on, but I don't. The house is still there. I'm sure waiting for the next fool to knock. I think of my dad, his hard life, his warnings. He'd tell me to tough it out, to forget, but he never faced something like this. Marissa's name is a wound, one the house reopened on. It won't let heal. I see her in every shadow, hear her in every silence. And I know the truth, 1427. Oak Hollow didn't just scare us. It claimed us, and its shadow will linger always. I've always been drawn to the solitude of these mountains. The steep, tangled paths, the gnarled trees clutching at the sky, the way the earth seems to hold its breath. They pull me in. My metal detector is my excuse, a tool to hunt for relics, old coins, or fragments of history buried in the dirt. That day, I ventured deeper than usual into a remote section where the ground dipped sharply, and the forest grew so dense it felt like the trees were watching. The air was cooler here, damp, with a faint metallic tang that clung to my tongue. My boots crunched over brittle leaves, each step echoing in the stillness, as if the mountain itself was listening. I was alone, or so I thought. The detector's faint beeps guided me a rhythm that kept my mind focused. But then a strange signal, sharp, insistent, broke the pattern. Pattern interruption. It wasn't the usual dull hum of a rusted bullet or a lost buckle. This was different, louder, like a scream in the silence. I froze, my heart thudding against my ribs, and followed the sound to a spot where the ground seemed to collapse inward. A narrow, jagged hole, barely visible, was cloaked in moss and twisted roots, like the earth had tried to swallow it whole. I knelt, peering into the darkness, and my breath caught in my throat. At the bottom, maybe 10 feet down, was a child's bicycle. Not a shiny new one, but a rusted, skeletal frame. Its handlebars twisted its tires, long rotted away. It lay there, abandoned, in a place no child could ever reach. Sensory overload. The sight hit me like a wave, the chipped red paint glowing faintly in the dim light, the warped spokes glinting like broken teeth, the way the shadows seemed to curl around it, protective, possessive. My skin prickled, a cold sweat trickling down my spine. Who brought this here? Why the questions clawed at me, each one sharper than the last? I leaned closer, my flashlight beam slicing through the dark. The hole was deep, its walls slick with damp earth roots dangling like veins. The bicycle seemed to pulse in the light, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Embedded command. Feel the weight of it now, the way it pulls you in, demands you look closer. I couldn't tear my eyes away. There were no paths nearby, no signs of human presence, no footprints, no tire tracks. Nothing but the oppressive silence of the forest. My mind raced, conjuring images of a child lost in these woods, their laughter snuffed out, their bicycle tossed into this pit like a forgotten toy. Or worse, something darker, something deliberate. I tried to shake it off, to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank, or some old junk discarded years ago. But the isolation of this place, the way the hole seemed hidden, almost intentional, gnawed at me. I remembered a story my grandfather told me as a kid, a nested storytelling moment that flooded back now. He'd spoken of these mountains of soldiers who never came home, of locals who swore the forest held on to its dead. Sometimes he'd said, his voice low, the earth keeps things it shouldn't, things that don't belong to the living anymore. His words echoed in my head, each syllable anchoring me to the fear creeping up my spine. Anchoring, I decided to climb down. My hands shook as I gripped the roots, lowering myself into the hole. The air grew colder, thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. The walls seemed to close in the earth, pressing against me, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. When my boots hit the bottom, the ground was soft, almost spongy, as if it had been waiting for me. The bicycle was closer now, its rusted frame gleaming faintly, like it was watching me back. I reached out my fingers, brushing the handlebars, and a jolt ran through me. Not electric, but something deeper, like touching a memory that wasn't mine. Trance loop. The forest faded, the world narrowing to this moment, this object, this impossible relic, in a place it shouldn't be. I searched for anything else. Bones, clothes. Some clue to explain this. Nothing. Just the bicycle, alone, abandoned. My flashlight flickered, the beam stuttering, as if the darkness was fighting back. My heart pounded a drumbeat in my ears, urging me to leave. Sensory overload. The smell of damp earth mixed with something sour, metallic, like old blood. The silence was deafening now, broken only by my ragged breaths. I took photos, my hands trembling, knowing I needed proof, something to anchor this moment to reality. But even as I snapped the pictures, I felt it, the weight of being watched, not by eyes, but by something older, hungrier. Climbing out was harder. The roots seemed to slip from my grasp, the walls tighter, as if the hole didn't want to let me go. When I finally pulled myself onto the surface, I collapsed, gasping, the forest looming over me, like a jury. I reported the find to the rangers, my voice shaking as I described the bicycle, the hole, the unnatural stillness. They nodded, took notes, but their eyes said they didn't believe me. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing back. No investigation, no answers. Just silence. That bicycle haunts me still. Pattern interruption. I can't hike those trails anymore without feeling it, the pull of that hole, the weight of that rusted frame. At night, I dream of it, not just lying there, but moving its wheels, spinning in the dark, its handlebars twisting toward me. I wake up, sweating, the image burned into my mind. Embedded command. Picture it, now that small broken bicycle alone in the earth, waiting for someone to find it, to know its story. I've tried to research the area, digging through old records of missing children, accidents, anything. Nothing fits. The battlefield's history is all soldiers and shrapnel, not children's toys. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it was ever about a child. Maybe the bicycle was a lure, a trap, something left by the mountain itself to draw me in. Trance, loop. I see it again, those rusted spokes that chipped paint, the way the shadows clung to it. And I'm back in that hole, the earth pressing, in the silence, screaming. My grandfather's voice returns his stories of the forest's hunger, and I can't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone down there. Something was with me, something that wanted me to stay. I've stopped hiking alone. The metal detector sits in my closet, gathering dust. But the memory of that bicycle, that hole it's carved into me, a wound that won't heal. Anchoring. Every creak of my house, every shadow in the corner, takes me back to that moment, that impossible find. What was it doing there? Who left it? And why do I feel like it's still waiting, deep in that hidden crevice, for me to come back? Every night, I walk home under the same street lights, their glow flickering like a heartbeat. But one night, a voice called my name, a name I never shared. And now, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting. The air clung to my skin, heavy with the scent of damp asphalt and pine. It was late, just past 9, and the plaza where I worked at the electronics store was already a ghost town. The neon signs buzzed faintly, their colors bleeding into the dusk. I'd missed the last bus, a habit I'd fallen into more often than I cared to admit. Walking home wasn't smart, but the quiet of the residential streets, lined with oaks and glowing porch lights, felt like a balm after hours of fluorescent lights and customer complaints. My sneakers scuffed against the sidewalk, the rhythm steady, familiar. I told myself it was just another night. But something in my chest tightened, like a warning I couldn't yet read. The neighborhood was safe, or so I thought. Houses stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows warm with the glow of families winding down. A dog barked somewhere, its voice muffled behind a fence. I adjusted my backpack, the weight of my work apron, and a half-empty water bottle shifting against my spine. The street curved gently, and I followed it, my breath visible in the cooling air. That's when I saw it, a dark gray sedan, parked under a street light that flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. The car wasn't new, but it wasn't a wreck either. Its lines were soft, rounded, like something from a decade past. The driver's window was down, and a faint curl of cigarette smoke drifted out, catching the light. I kept walking, my eyes flicking to the car. A man sat inside his silhouette, broad, but not imposing. He leaned back in the seat, one hand resting on the steering wheel. I couldn't see his face clearly, but the glint of a gray beard caught my attention. He wore a delivery uniform, dark jacket, some logo I didn't recognize stitched on the chest. My stomach twisted, though I couldn't say why. He hadn't done anything, hadn't even looked my way, but the air felt heavier now, like the moment before a storm breaks. "Hey, can I ask you something quick?" His voice cut through the silence, low and steady, like he was commenting on the weather. I froze, my sneakers rooted to the pavement. My heart kicked up a dull thud in my ears. I didn't want to answer, but politeness, or maybe fear, made me turn my head. "Yeah," I said, keeping my distance, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. He smiled, his face coming into focus under the streetlight. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. His eyes were shadowed, but his expression was calm, too calm. Like he'd rehearsed this moment. "I've got something in the trunk," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "I think you'd like it. Mind helping me out?" My skin prickled, a cold wave rushing from my scalp to my toes. The words were ordinary, but they landed wrong, like a key that didn't fit a lock. My mind screamed, "Don't go near him. Don't look. Just move." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I took a step back, my backpack brushing against a mailbox. He tilted his head, his smile widening just enough to show teeth. "It's better if you see it," he said, his tone almost playful. "You seem like the curious type, Lewis." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't told him my name. I hadn't said more than a handful of words. My legs moved before my brain caught up, carrying me away from the car, my pace quick, but not running. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me panic. His voice followed me, gufka, and unhurried. "See you around, Lewis." The words burrowed into my skull, each syllable a needle. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. My breath came in shallow bursts, my eyes fixed on the corner ahead. The street light buzzed above me, its flicker matching the pulse in my temples. I reached the corner, my apartment building just a few blocks away, and dared a glance over my shoulder. The sedan hadn't moved. He was still there, watching his face, a pale smudge in the dark. That night, I locked my door, checked it twice, and sat on my couch, the TV on mute. My hands shook as I dialed the police. The officer listened, asked questions, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. No crime had been committed. Not really. Just a creepy guy in a car who knew my name. They promised to patrol the area, but their words felt hollow. I went back the next day, knocking on doors, hoping someone's doorbell camera had caught something. One neighbor, an older woman with kind eyes, let me watch her footage. The audio picked up our voices, faint but unmistakable, his calm invitation, my hesitant reply. But the car was just out of frame, a shadow at the edge of the screen. It was like he'd planned it that way. Weeks passed, but the memory clung to me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. I avoided that street, took the bus, even when it meant waiting in the cold. But a part of me needed to know, was he gone, or was he still there? I told myself it was a one-time thing, a random creep passing through. So one night, I steeled myself and took the old route home. My heart pounded as I turned onto the street, the oaks looming like silent witnesses. The street light was still flickering, casting jagged shadows across the pavement. And there it was, the sedan parked in the exact same spot. He was waiting. My chest tightened, my breath catching in my throat. The car looked untouched, like it hadn't moved in months. A thick layer of pollen coated the hood yellow and powdery, undisturbed by rain or wind. A single dead leaf was wedged between the windshield and wiper, brittle and unmoving. The tires sank into the dirt at the curb, as if the car's weight had settled deeper with time. And on the trunk, faint but unmistakable, was a smiley face drawn in the dust. It wasn't there the first night I was sure of it. The lines were weathered, softened by days of exposure, but they mocked me all the same. He sat in the driver's seat, his posture unchanged. His face was turned toward me, his eyes hidden in shadow. That same calm, almost bored expression. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched as I passed. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to keep walking. My eyes locked on the sidewalk. I wanted to scream, to demand who he was, how he knew me. But fear sealed my lips. I reached my apartment, my hands fumbling with the keys, and locked myself inside. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't shake the image of that car, that face, that smiley face grinning in the dust. The next day, I called the police again. They took another report, but their tone was the same, sympathetic, but skeptical. I stopped walking that street. I bought pepper spray, started taking different routes, checking over my shoulder every few steps. But the questions gnawed at me. How did he know my name? Why was he still there, waiting, unmoving? And what was in that trunk? I try not to think about it, but at night, when the world is quiet, I see that sedan in my mind. I see his face, his smile, and I hear his voice, soft and certain. See you around Lewis. I don't know what he's waiting for. But I know one thing I don't want to find out. The hotel's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the breakfast buffet. I was 22, a traveling photographer, alone in a strange town, my camera bag slung over my shoulder. The man at the next table caught my eye. Gray hair, rough hands, a construction worker's jacket. He smiled, and I nodded back, polite but distant. "Good morning," I said, my voice soft routine. His reply was warm, too warm, and something in his gaze lingered like he'd seen me before. I didn't know then that he'd follow me. His presence, a shadow I couldn't shake, turning a safe haven into a cage. The hotel in Harlingen was a bland box of beige walls and faded carpets, a temporary home for me and 3 other photographers. We were here to shoot church directory photos, a job that sent us crisscrossing the country, each in our own car, each alone. I liked the solitude, the rhythm of setting up lights and coaxing smiles from strangers. But that morning, as I scooped watery eggs onto my plate, the air felt off, too thick for the early hour. The TV droned local news, and I sat near the window, my camera bag at my feet, the world outside still dark. He was at the next table, his plate piled with bacon, his jacket patched with dirt. Late 40s, maybe, with gray hair and a face carved by years of labor. I caught his eye by accident, and he smiled, a flash of teeth that didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning," I said, a reflex, my voice barely audible over the TV. "Morning," he replied, his tone too eager, like he'd been waiting for me to speak. I nodded, turning back to my food, but his gaze stayed heavy, like a hand on my shoulder. We exchanged small talk, polite, meaningless. He said he was here with his construction crew, working a job nearby. I mentioned my photography, keeping it vague, my instincts wary. "Have a good one," I said, as I stood to leave my bag slung over my shoulder. "See you later," he replied, his voice low, almost a promise. I brushed it off, heading to my room, the encounter already fading. The day stretched ahead. Work didn't start until 11 a.m., and I hadn't slept well. The hotel bed too stiff, the walls too thin. Back in my room, I collapsed onto the bed, the curtains drawn against the gray dawn. I planned to nap, to shake off the unease, but the phone on the nightstand rang sharp and insistent. I frowned. Nobody called hotel rooms anymore. I picked up my voice, cautious. "Hello?" Silence answered a hollow void that made my skin prickle. I hung up the quiet, returning, but the call lingered a splinter in my thoughts. Minutes later, it rang again. "Hello?" I said, sharper now. Nothing. I slammed the receiver down, my pulse quickening, and unplugged the phone, setting it aside. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, and I wondered who was on the other end listening. Work started at 11. But I left early, my camera bag heavy, the hotel's fluorescent halls too bright. As I stepped out of my room, I saw him, the man from breakfast, leaning against the wall, his jacket slung over his arm. He straightened when he saw me, his smile returning too familiar. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his voice casual but sharp, like he had a right to know. I froze, my keycard slippery in my hand. "Work," I said. My tone clipped, stepping toward the elevator. He followed his steps, slow, deliberate. The hallway narrowing around us. What kind of work? He pressed his eyes on me, unblinking. I mumbled something about photography. My heart thudding. The elevator doors too far. A door opened behind me, and my friend, a female photographer, stepped out, her presence a lifeline. "Hey," she said, oblivious to the tension. I joined her, my breath shallow, and we headed to her car, the man's gaze burning into my back. In the car, I told her about the calls, my voice low, the hotel shrinking in the rear view. "That's weird," she said, her brow furrowed. "I got calls, too, but I thought it was a glitch." We drove to the church, the day's work, a blur of lights and faces, but the unease stayed a weight I couldn't shake. The man's voice echoed, See you later," and I wondered if he meant it, if he was watching, waiting. The hotel was supposed to be safe, a place to rest, but it felt like a stage, and I was the unwitting star. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in, lightning flashing through the lobby windows. We stood by the doors, watching the sky crack open, the air electric with tension. My friend mentioned the calls. Again, her voice uneasy, and I nodded my thoughts on the man, his smile, his questions. The storm felt like a warning, the world outside as restless as I was. I headed to my room, the hallway dim, every shadow a threat. The phone was still unplugged, but the silence was worse, a void that begged to be filled. I locked my door, the bolt heavy, the room a fragile shield. The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the walls, but it was the quiet between crashes that unnerved me. I sat on the bed, my camera bag at my feet. The TV muted its flicker, the only light. A knock came soft, at first, then sharper, insistent. My heart stopped. I didn't move my breath, shallow, praying it was a mistake. It came again, deliberate, a fist against wood. I crept to the door, my hands shaking, and peered through the peephole. He was there. The man from breakfast, his face distorted by the lens, his eyes fixed on the door, like he could see me through it. He leaned closer, his ear against the wood, listening, his breath visible in the cold hall. My pulse roared. My body, frozen and every instinct screaming to hide. He knocked again, softer now, almost playful, and I backed away, my phone clutched tight. I called my mom. my voice a whisper, the storm drowning my words. "There's a guy at my door." I said, my throat tight. "He's been following me." She told me to stay calm, to call the front desk, but the fear was a tide pulling me under. I tiptoed back to the peephole, my heart pounding. He was still there, his head tilted, listening. Then he moved, stepping into the hallway's shadow, hiding in the door's alcove, like he thought I wouldn't see. I dialed the front desk, my voice shaking, reporting a stranger at my door. They promised to check, but minutes passed, the knocks returning fainter, now taunting. I texted my friend her room down the hall, and she called the desk, too, her own fear mirroring mine. The hotel sent security, and the knocks stopped, the hallway silent, when they arrived. They found no one, but we were moved to new rooms, the manager apologizing, his voice hollow. My new room had a hot tub, a luxury I didn't want, the water's hum, a mockery of calm. I locked the door, checked the windows, the storm still raging outside. The man was gone, his cruise manager, warned, but the fear stayed a shadow in my thoughts. I didn't see him again, but his presence lingered, his smile, his voice, his knocks. The hotel wasn't safe anymore, its walls too thin, its halls too long. I told the church clients, strangers, who offered their homes, their kindness, a balm I couldn't trust. I was wary now. Every face a potential threat, every sound a warning. The job ended, and I left Harlingen the hotel, a memory I couldn't shake. I still hear the knocks sometimes, faint in my dreams, his face in the peephole listening, waiting. The world feels smaller now, less safe. And I wonder if he's out there, his smile unchanged, looking for me. The studio's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow that made everything feel too sharp, too exposed. I stood on the polished floor, my hands gripping the pole, my breath steady, but my heart uneasy. Paula was there, as always, her tiny frame coiled with unnatural strength, her eyes locked on me in a way that felt like a violation. She wasn't just watching, she was studying, copying, becoming me. And then, in a moment that still freezes my blood, her eyes turned black. Not human, not alive, but something else. Something that wasn't supposed to be seen. I'd known Paula for months, ever since I joined the aerial yoga and pole dancing classes at the local studio. She was a force of nature. 4'10", barely 85 pounds, pushing 60, but moving like a woman half her age. Her wiry frame seemed to hum with energy, her movements precise, almost predatory. We weren't friends, not really, but we'd chat sometimes, exchange smiles, share the occasional laugh. She was vibrant, intense, the kind of person who commanded attention without trying. But there was always something off about her, a shadow behind her smile that I couldn't place. Sensory overload. The way her gaze lingered too long, the way her voice carried a subtle edge, like she was measuring me with every word. It started small. She'd mimic my stretches, mirror my poses, her body twisting into the same shapes as mine. At first, I thought it was flattery. Maybe she admired my flexibility, a gift from my connective tissue disorder that let me bend just a little further than most. But then it got weirder. She dyed her hair the same shade as mine, a deep chestnut brown. She painted her nails the exact coral pink I'd chosen the week before. She started wearing clothes that echoed mine. Flowy tank tops, black leggings with a single white stripe down the side. Pattern interruption. One day, she showed up with a scarf tied around her wrist, identical to the one I'd worn to class the previous session. It wasn't admiration. It was obsession. She even bought me clothes, once a tight black leotard with silver stitching, the kind I'd never wear, but she insisted would look perfect on me. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too eager, like she was dressing a doll, not a person. Embedded command. Feel it now, the way her gaze crawls over you, like she's peeling back your skin to wear it. I brushed it off, told myself I was overreacting, but my stomach twisted every time she was near. Paula wasn't just mimicking me, she was trying to become me, to erase the line between us. The studio was my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the rhythm of movement, the burn of muscle, the freedom of flight. But Paula's presence turned it into a cage. I'd catch her watching me during class, her eyes unblinking, her lips curled in a faint, knowing smile. She was competitive, maybe even a covert narcissist, always pushing to outdo me, to stretch further, to hold a pose longer. I didn't care about the rivalry. I just wanted to dance, to feel the pole beneath my palms, the air against my skin. But Paula made it impossible to ignore her. That night, the studio was nearly empty. Just me, Paula, and one other woman, spinning lazily on her pole across the room. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder than usual, a grating hum that drilled into my skull. The air was thick, heavy, with the scent of sweat and metal polish. I was working on a sideways pulsate, my legs extended, my body arcing gracefully around the pole. I could feel Paula's eyes on me, a weight that pressed against my spine. Trance. Loop. I tried to focus, to sink into the motion, but her stare was relentless, pulling me out of myself, making my skin crawl. I finished my move and turned to smile at her, a reflex to ease the tension. That's when it happened. Pattern interruption. Her eyes weren't hers. They were black, completely, impossibly black, like twin voids swallowing the light. No pupils, no whites, just an endless darkness that seemed to pulse with something alive, something wrong. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, my heart slamming against my ribs. Sensory overload. The room seemed to tilt, the fluorescent lights flickering, casting her face in stark, unnatural shadows. Her expression was blank, vacant, as if Paula had checked out, leaving something else in her place. I couldn't look away. For several agonizing seconds, I stared into those black eyes, searching for a trace of the woman I knew. There was nothing. It was like looking into a mirror that showed no reflection, only an abyss. Nested storytelling. My mind flashed to a story my aunt told me when I was a kid about a woman in her village who'd been taken by something during a ritual gone wrong. Her eyes went black. My aunt had whispered, her voice trembling, like the spirit was looking through her, not at you, but into you. I'd laughed it off then, a child dismissing ghost stories. But now, standing in that too bright studio, I felt the truth of it, the weight of something ancient and hungry staring back at me. Paula didn't move, didn't blink. Her body was still unnaturally, so like a puppet, waiting for its strings to be pulled. The air grew colder, the buzzing lights louder, the scent of metal, sharper, biting. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs were lead, my voice trapped in my chest. Anchoring. That moment, those black eyes became a hook in my mind, a memory that would drag me back to this night over and over. Finally, I tore my gaze away, stumbling toward the table where my water bottle sat. I grabbed it, my hands shaking, and took a sip, the liquid cold against my lips, grounding me just enough to keep from falling apart. When I looked back, Paula was gone. Not physically, she was still there, spinning slowly on her pole, her eyes normal again, a faint smile on her lips. But something had shifted. The studio felt wrong, like the air had been sucked out, leaving a vacuum that pressed against my skin. I mumbled an excuse and left my heart still racing, my mind replaying those black eyes, that vacant stare. Trance loop. I see them now. Every time I close my eyes, those twin voids pulling me in, whispering secrets I don't want to know. I never went back to that class. I told myself It was the mirroring the way Paula tried to wear my skin, but it was more than that. It was those eyes that moment when I saw something that wasn't human, something that didn't belong in this world. I've tried to rationalize it. Bad lighting, exhaustion, my own paranoia, but nothing explains it. Sensory overload. The memory is too sharp, too real. The buzz of the lights, the chill in the air, the way her face seemed to flicker, like a mask slipping to reveal something underneath. I asked around casually about Paula. No one else saw what I did. The other woman in the studio that night said Paula was intense, but normal. But I know what I saw. Embedded command. Picture it now, those black eyes staring not at you, but through you, into the parts of you that you hide even from yourself. I've heard whispers since then, stories of people who've seen things like this. Eyes turning black, a person becoming something else for just a moment. Some say it's possession, others a glitch in reality. I don't know what to believe, but I know I wasn't supposed to see it. And I know Paula didn't know I did. She's still out there, I think. Still in that studio, spinning on her pole, watching, waiting. Sometimes I dream of her. Her eyes black again, her smile stretching too wide, her voice calling my name in a tone that isn't hers. Anchoring. That image, those eyes, they're burned into me, a reminder that some things you see can't be unseen. I've moved on, found a new gym, a new routine, but I check my reflection more often now, searching for my own eyes, making sure they're still mine. Ciao. The door was my sanctuary, my shield against the world. Until she broke it down, her screams echoing in my skull, her shadow looming over my naked fear. Now I can't trust a locked door anymore. In 2020, I was 20, standing on the precipice of independence. After a year, trapped with a housemate whose mood swings could rival a storm, I found my own place, a creaky 3-story relic carved into apartments nestled against a wall of whispering pines. It wasn't much peeling paint, warped floorboards, a sink the size of a notebook. But it was mine. For the first time, I could breathe without someone else's chaos crowding my air. The woods outside my window stretched endlessly, their shadows dancing in the summer heat. I'd sit in the garden with neighbors sipping lemonade, their laughter a warm anchor. Everyone was kind, everyone that is, except the woman below me. Her name was Karen, though I didn't know it at first. She was around 50, her face etched with lines that seemed carved by anger rather than time. Her apartment sat directly beneath mine, and I'd hear her pacing. Sometimes, her footsteps heavy, deliberate, like she was measuring the space for something. The house was old, its bones groaning under the weight of years. A metal gate guarded the entrance, and alarms blinked in the yard, a precaution against the brown bears that roamed the nearby woods. I didn't mind the bears. They were predictable, wild, but honest. Karen, though she was something else. It started a month after I moved in. I was sprawled on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when a pounding shook my door. Not a knock pounding, like someone was trying to break through. My heart lurched, and I scrambled to my feet, the floor cold against my bare soles. I opened the door a crack, and there she was. Karen, eyes blazing, her mouth a tight line. "Your bathtub's leaking." She spat, her voice sharp as a blade. "There's water on my ceiling." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'll call the landlord," I stammered, trying to sound calm. "He'll get someone to check it." Her eyes narrowed, and she turned away, without a word, her footsteps echoing down the stairs. I called the landlord, but he was halfway across the world, lounging on some beach. "I'll handle it when I'm back," he said, his voice dripping with indifference. 2 months, he said. 2 months of waiting. I stopped using my bathtub, relying instead on the kindness of my neighbors across the hall, a retired couple with a yapping terrier. They let me shower at their place, waving off my offers to pay. I made them drawings of their dog pixelated portraits on my tablet as a thank you. Their warmth felt like a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone in this crumbling house was out to get me. 2 weeks later, the couple left for a work trip. Just a few days, they said, their voices heavy with apology. I nodded, smiled, told them it was fine. But it wasn't. I was a clean freak, always had been, and the thought of not showering properly gnawed at me. The sink was useless, too small to even wash my hair. So, one evening, I made a decision. Just a quick shower, I told myself. Wash my hair. Get out. No harm done. The bathroom was dim, the light bulb flickering like it was on its last breath. I stepped into the tub, the water warm against my scalp, my headphones blasting a podcast about true crime. Ironic in hindsight, I was rinsing the shampoo from my hair, the steam curling around me when the door exploded inward. Not opened, exploded the wooden frame, splintering under a force I couldn't comprehend. Karen stood there, her silhouette filling the doorway, her eyes wild with rage. "You're flooding my apartment," she screamed, her voice a jagged edge that sliced through my shock. I froze, water streaming down my face, my body exposed and vulnerable. My headphones slipped off, dangling by the cord, and I scrambled to cover myself, my hands shaking. "I'm sorry," I gasped, but she didn't hear me. She kept screaming words, tumbling over each other. Flood ruin. Renovated police. I stumbled out of the tub, grabbing a towel, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. She stormed off, muttering about calling her husband. I locked myself in my bedroom, my fingers trembling as I dialed the landlord again. No answer. I sank to the floor, the towel damp against my skin, and sobbed. My sanctuary, my safe space had been violated. The door's broken frame stared at me like a gaping wound. And then I heard it, her voice louder now outside my apartment. She wasn't alone. 3 men stood in the hallway when I peeked through the crack. Karen's husband, a hulking figure in a cop uniform, and 2 others, their badges glinting under the fluorescent light. "You're damaging our property," her husband said, his voice cold, authoritative. I tried to explain the texts to the landlord. The concrete floor under the tub, the tiny drips that couldn't possibly justify this. I showed them my phone, the messages time-stamped proof of my attempts to fix things. They exchanged glances, their whispers low and unreadable, before leaving with a warning, "Fix it, or we'll be back." Karen's smile as they left was triumphant, a predator savoring its kill. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, the broken door propped shut, with a chair, my eyes darting to every shadow. The next day, I spoke to the upstairs neighbor, an older woman who'd lived there for decades. Her face softened with pity as she told me the truth. Karen had a vendetta, a 15-year-old grudge against the landlord over some forgotten dispute. Every renter in my apartment had been her target, driven out by her rage. "She's made it her mission," the neighbor said, her voice low, as if Karen might hear. "To make your life hell." I moved out within a week, my savings just enough for a new deposit. The nightmares came later. Karen's face in my doorway, her screams echoing the splintered wood. I can't wear headphones anymore, not fully. One ear stays free, always listening, always waiting for the sound of a door giving way. I check my locks obsessively, my fingers tracing the bolts, my heart racing at every unexpected noise. That house, that woman broke something in me. And I wonder even now if she's still there, waiting for the next tenant to destroy. The forest swallowed us whole that night, its shadows thicker than I'd ever known. I was 19, a college freshman, walking beside a near stranger who'd one day be my husband. The woods around our campus were supposed to be safe, a playground for late-night adventures, but the path we chose was a labyrinth twisting us deeper into darkness. Then it came a scream, not human, not animal, but something torn from nightmares, echoing through the trees. It wasn't just sound. It was a warning, and we were already its prey. The air was crisp the night before Halloween, buzzing with a restless energy. Our campus sat nestled in a bowl of dense forest, its trees a familiar backdrop to our late-night walks. My friends and I loved these treks, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the thrill of shadows dancing in moonlight. But that night, the group dwindled homework tests, exhaustion, until it was just me and him. A guy I barely knew his name, still new on my tongue. We were acquaintances, thrown together by a friend's suggestion, her voice teasing, "Go anyway. You'll be fine." We laughed it off, awkward, but game, and set out our sneakers, scuffing the dirt path. The woods were alive, crickets, humming owls, calling the air cool against my skin. We aimed for the altar site, a clearing with a log shaped like a table littered with trinkets from other students. It was a landmark, a goal, but the darkness played tricks, the path twisting under our feet. My flashlight was weak, its beam swallowed by the trees, and his phone was dying, leaving us to stumble through the gloom. 45 minutes, and the path vanished, the trees closing in their branches, clawing at my jacket. We joked about getting lost, about survival, cuddling, to stay warm, but the humor felt thin. The forest too quiet. I glanced at him, his face pale in the faint light, his eyes scanning the dark. "We're circling," he said, his voice low, and I nodded, my stomach tightening. The woods weren't our playground anymore. They were a maze, and we were its mice. We decided to cut straight, hoping to hit a road, or the ocean's edge, the forest hemmed by civilization. But the ground was rough roots snagging my feet, mud sucking at my shoes. A river appeared, its water, black, and still forcing us to wade through the cold, biting my legs. Swamps followed the air, thick with damp rot. Mosquitoes buzzing in my ears. My heart pounded not from effort, but from the growing sense that we weren't alone, that the woods were watching, waiting. An hour later, we stumbled onto a wider trail, its dirt packed hard, a faint hope in the dark. I smiled, relief flooding me. "This'll get us out," I said, my voice bright, too bright. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the trees, their shadows deeper, now the moonlight gone. We followed the trail, our steps quick, the air heavier, the crickets silent. The forest held its breath, and so did I. Then it came a scream, sharp and jagged, tearing through the night. It wasn't human, wasn't animal, but a mix, like a pig's squeal, a bird's shriek, a woman's wail, all twisted into one. It lasted 10 seconds, maybe more. And it was close, too close, echoing from the trees ahead. My blood froze, my feet rooted to the ground. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. He shook his head, his face pale, his breath visible in the cold air. "I don't know," he said, and the fear in his eyes mirrored mine. We backed into a meadow. The open space, a frail shield, the trees looming around us. The scream lingered in my ears, its edge cutting deeper with every replay. We stood there, frozen, scanning the dark, our flashlights useless against the void. The meadow was wide grass, silver, under faint stars, but it felt exposed, like we were on display. I clutched his arm, my fingers tight, the forest's silence louder than the scream, a warning of something still out there. I thought of stories, banshees, ghosts, creatures that hunted in the dark. My mind raced, trying to name the sound, to make it familiar, but it defied reason, a sound born of nightmares. The trees stood silent, their branches still, but I felt eyes on us, unseen, unblinking. He whispered, "We need to move." But neither of us did, our bodies locked by fear. The meadow a trap we couldn't escape. Minutes passed, the silence suffocating. Then a branch snapped sharp and close in the tree line. A bush shook leaves rustling, and the scream came again, longer, louder. 15 seconds of pure terror, right under a tree, not 20 feet away. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I grabbed him, my arms around his waist, a reflex born of fear. "Sorry," I mumbled, stepping back, my face hot, but he didn't laugh, his eyes wide, fixed on the trees. We turned, spotting a faint trail, curving around a bend, one we'd missed in the dark. I pointed my voice, barely a whisper. "There." We moved fast, the path narrow leaves, crunching underfoot. My phone's flashlight was dim, its battery low, but I flipped it open and shut, hoping the motion would scare whatever was out there. The forest was alive now, not with crickets, but with movement leaves, rustling on one side, then the other, a pattern, like something was circling, staying just out of sight. Another scream right behind us, so close I felt it in my bones. We ran stupid and desperate branches, clawing at my face, the path twisting under us. My lungs burned, my legs heavy, but the fear was fuel driving us forward. 20 paces later, we burst into a meadow. We recognized wide and open the campus road just beyond. The scream came once more from the tree line, but nothing followed the forest holding its secret. We sprinted to the road pavement, solid under our feet. The campus lights a beacon. My chest heaved, my body shaking, but we were out alive. We didn't speak, just ran to our dorms, promising to talk in the morning, the adrenaline too thick to process. The woods were behind us, but their weight stayed a shadow. I couldn't shake. Back in my dorm, I sat on my bed, headphones on my roommate, asleep, the scream echoing in my head. I searched online, desperate for answers. Screech, owls, foxes, anything to explain it. Nothing fit. The sound was too human, too raw, too wrong. I gave up sleep, pulling me under, but the fear lingered, a guest I didn't invite. Morning came, and we told our friends, the story spilling out, jagged and raw. It became a campus legend, dubbed the Banshee. In the woods, whispered over, coffee, half laughed at, half feared. Some wanted to make a documentary, but it faded, swallowed by campus noise. Months later, a friend heard the story and stopped me. "That's a cougar," he said, his voice certain. I blinked, the idea foreign, but fitting the scream, suddenly animal, not spectral. I researched, found cougar screams online, their eerie wails close to what we heard. Trackers confirmed sightings, a kill site on campus. 6 months later, the cat's territory circling back every half year. Knowing it was a cougar didn't erase the fear, it deepened it. We'd been stalked, hunted, our lives a thread from snapping. The woods weren't haunted, but they were alive, and we were lucky to escape their claws.